Hi guys, what are we going to do today? Today we are going to work on a butterfly garland. I'm going to show you how to use clay and make a fun garland. And you see two different concepts depending on how you base coat and how you top coat. Let's get started.
So I'm going to be using this wire star garland, and this is going to be the base for my project. And these are 2-inch stars so that my pieces will actually fit on them. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is, if you ever find these garlands, you're probably going to have to open them up. And then I have my clay in my mold. But let's start with this star garland. And to make it tighter, I'm just using the screwdriver, but you could use a pen, you could use almost anything. And I'm just twirling this, and you'll see here that you will have a tighter space in between the two stars. And then when I attach something there, it's a lot more sturdy. And I'm just going to continue that in between all of them. So this wire is heavy, but it's not so heavy that I can't just bend it. Depending on what type of a garland you have, whether it's circles, stars, hearts, whatever it is, you can do this. You just want to make sure your metal pieces are just a little bit smaller than your clay pieces so that they're completely covered and you don't see them. You really could probably glue things on here. I'd be afraid that it might not be quite as stable. That's why I kind of, what I'm gonna do is have bigger elements on these and smaller ones overlapping. And I feel like I'll have the strength in between. So after I've done that, I'm making sure that the flat sides are up. If you had a certain way, if you wanted your garland to go like that, you would form that now. I think I'm just gonna have it run just the way it is, kind of straight. And then now I can do either a loop or a hook or something on each end. Just wipe off if you have any rust or dust or anything on your pieces so your clay adheres very well. I'm using my air dry clay, my IOD air dry clay, but any type of a clay probably would work for this. I just really like this one. I'm already putting it in another bag because I know when I get going I want it to dry out. So what I did for this one right here is I use the same element here, and I could use some different ones, but then I add different ones on top of them. And I'm just using a little cornstarch in here. I know I'm going to need 9 big elements, so I'll just start with that. Roll the mold, and you can let gravity kind of pull it out. This butterfly mold is not quite as thick, the depth of the pieces, so you need to be careful when you're pulling them out. And they might not be totally smooth on the back, but I'm wanting them a little bit thicker on back. And then I found if I flip it to get it out from the top 2 wings first, that seems to help. Okay, so what we're gonna do next is I'm going to start gluing these big elements on here. So I'm using my Tight Bond Quick and Thick. I really like using this one. I really want a nice tacky glue that's going to hold well because they are kind of free hanging. Carefully. And I am just covering this star. I'm pressing them a little bit. And when they dry, you won't see any of the stars or the glue. Now if they're too close, you can spread them out a little bit too. So I'm also using the coils, and I'm putting a little glue on there if I need to help stabilize them, but I'm also going to be adding other elements in between them. So depending how big or small you want it, you don't have to coil it quite as tightly. This one's a little tighter than the first one I did. Bend everything the way you want it to start because it's really hard to do it when all the pieces are on there. Okay, so now I am going to start doing the smaller pieces in between. And you actually could be doing all different ones if you wanted to. I will just start adding some smaller different elements in between them all. So I'm just gonna fill most of these up with just some cornstarch so they'll release easier. And I really might not need glue on the whole thing. I'm just gonna cover it because that's gonna be on the back anyway. And I'm attaching it so it's on the coil, but it's also in between two of these butterflies. I'm gonna have this guy kind of flying down. So when they dry, you might have a little bit of cracking, but I don't think that really matters. So like if these are right here and this is bent, it might crack a little bit when it's drying, and it might pull and crack in between a little. Add 3 more, and then we're gonna let them dry. What I do is have the majority of it there and then a piece laying over. You can see the different ways I put this together. Some are further on a piece, some are just hanging off the edge or straight in the center. It looks like, when you're doing this project, it looks like I probably used about 3/4 of the clay. Okay, so we've got everything adhered, so we have our piece. Very carefully, I'll show you so you can see what the back looks like. Now, I am just going to let this fully dry before I do anything else. And I'll probably wait a whole day to let this dry and harden. The fun part about this is that some of the wings will bend down, they'll come up, they'll move depending on which way they're laying on here. So when they dry that way, then we'll paint them. So let's just let this dry. So the clay is dry, and you can see the way that the wings fell or went is the way we had the wire vented. And I am just going to paint this. For this particular mold, the base coat is what you see the least. The top coat is gonna fill in the crevices. And the crevices are larger than the top layer. So what you're going to base coat is what you are going to see the least. So I am just going to base coat this, let this dry. The paint, my base coat is dried. So now I'm just gonna put a water-based sealer on this. And it doesn't really matter what type of sealer you use. And then we're gonna put a wash over it. You wanna be really gentle with your clay because it's not laying flat. So if you put too much pressure on it, you may break it. So I'm just gonna let this dry, and then we're gonna do a wash. So when your sealer's dried, I'm gonna just do a wash. This is a clay-based paint, so it works really well. This is DIY, but I think there are other clay-based paints. I'm just gonna water it way down, and we are gonna go over the top of all of this. Once again, just be really careful because these pieces are clay, so you don't want to press down on them really hard. I'm just going to let this dry, and then we are going to rub some of it off. So when you've got your wash dried, now we are going to lightly rub back. I'm using a baby wipe. I think you could probably use maybe a not too damp, but a lightly damp paper towel. These baby wipes seem to work amazing. Once again, very carefully go over the edges of this. This one will take a little longer just because there's so much fine detail in it, and you want to be really careful when you're rubbing it. So to recap everything, we did our clay molds. We glued them onto our metal star garland for stability. And then we let that completely dry. We let all the clay dry. Then I did my base coat in this bright blue. And then I let that completely dry. Then I added a sealer, and you can use any liquid sealer you would like over the top of this. You just don't want to use wax. But a sealer over the top, and then you let that dry. Then I took my clay-based paint, and that is kind of an important thing. You really want to use a clay-based paint or something that comes off easily. So I used my clay-based paint, and I did that as a wash. I added quite a bit of water to that, and I put that over the top of this whole piece. And then when I let that dry, I am wiping off. And this wipes off very easily. So in a lot of molds, this one happens to have a lot of recessed pieces. Most of this mold is recessed. So On other molds, it would probably be the opposite. So you need to really look at your mold. So what I wanted was the lesser part to be the bluish green, and I wanted most of it to be the white. So I knew I would use that as my top coat. Because what I'm rubbing off are the top edges, and the recessed pieces, they're staying in. So the more you wipe off on this, the more of your base coat that's is gonna show through. So you can just look at your piece and decide how much you want showing through and how much of the wash you want showing through. I'm gonna try just a little bit of this gold over the top just to give it a little bit of a shimmer. Not a lot, and I'm just using my finger, and this is just a real light gold shimmery wax. So I'm just using a clear wax on here. There might have been a little bit of a darker wax in it. Once again, be really careful holding your pieces if you're waxing this with the big brush. I decided, even though I waxed it, I'm just doing a real quick spray of a gloss sealer over the top, just to give it a little bit of shine.
Okay, so this one takes a little while to do, but I hope you thought it was a fun project. And whether you do something really long or really short, I hope you try this out. But whatever you do, have fun.